Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Dundee Sole Podcast. Now, on this podcast, something that we have tried to document thoroughly, because I don't think it's very documented, do you?
It's been documented. It should be, as you've said before, in the Craig Robertson and Barry Smith pods, that it should probably be a movie. It's been a book, but I think somebody close to us should be writing a book about it. So
I think it's something that shouldn't be forgotten to the pages of history, and it's something that should be spoke about greatly. So we have investigated this, and brought it to this podcast as much as we can. And somebody's name kept cropping up in every podcast. And my understanding at the time was that everybody in the fan base said that Barry Smith and Rob Douglas would saved the club. But the guy we're going to speak to today, I would say, is definitely an unsung hero of this tale, and we're going to get. He's not done an interview in 15 years. So we're going to get some good news. Not news. We're going to get some good stories here. So introducing the man who had a great role in saving the club, Harry McLean. Good evening.
Hello.
how you doing?
I'm good. And you?
Totally brilliant that you're on now.
Yeah, it was a comment. It was a comment on the Barry Smith podcast for me that eventually it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Is that right?
It's partly right, yeah.
Partly right, yeah. I annoyed him by saying that he wouldn't come on, and here he is. So yeah, we'd like to take it back to the start, mate. So basically, what year were you born and where are you from?
Born in 1970, from Dundee. Grew up in Mid to begin with.
What was that like?
Oh, that's a podcast all on its own, to be honest. We escaped from Mid when I was 5. My father was intent on murdering my mum. So we bolted and ended up in a refuge for a couple of nights. And then we went and spent 5 years in one room in a house in Douglas till I was 10 years old. So it was a bit of a strange upbringing.
That's definitely a story to be told in a different kind of podcast.
Totally, yeah. And it's one of the things, it's something I never talk about, but I did it recently for DYW, Developing Young Workforce, to help young kids, right, to let them understand you could start wherever you are and you don't have to finish there. So I don't talk about that one very often, obviously, but it's long ago now, so we can crack on.
I didn't know you were involved in that kind of stuff, because that's something obviously very close to Chris's heart.
Yeah, it's what I do as well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the reason I do it is because, as I say, we basically fled, and you've got two choices in Dundee at that point in 70s Scotland. You either get on with it and make your own path in life, or you give up and you do what everybody else says you should do, and the system's designed to keep you where you are. So
yeah, 100%.
I'm absolutely against that.
Yeah.
So
that's I did not expect.
You didn't know that, did you?
Yeah, no, I did. No, I sort of want a question on it, but I think
you could ask away. It's all right.
Have you ever spoke to your dad since?
Nope. My father, I don't call him my dad, because in when I was 11 or 12, my dad came along, my stepdad, who was from London, and he, I never really talk about that either, but I owe him a huge debt of gratitude for actually looking after me and my sisters as well as my mum.
The step-around being like a male influence, yeah. Yeah,
and I quite like Millwall as a result, and I go and watch Millwall because of that. He's from Elephant and Castle. But no, I don't. He's dead now. I found out a year after he died that he was dead. Honestly, it's not. People say, "Oh, I feel sorry about that." I'm not at all, because he was a nasty piece of work. So he was in and out of the jail. He was in Perth more than he was in Dundee, to be fair. So that's the past, and you just move on from that. You can either give in to it or you get on with it, and that's what I teach kids now.
It was a lot more. Well, I don't say common, but I wasn't as spoke about, and I don't know. The stories I hear of the 70s and 80s, some pretty horrific to how people live nowadays.
Yeah, I think one of the things about the 70s or 80s, and we have more of it now, but it's more advertised now that people can get help. There wasn't any help available. I mean, as I said, we spent a couple of nights in a women's refuge at the top of Victoria Road. I think it's a mosque now up there.
All right, okay, I know.
You know where I am?
Yeah,
it's a white building on the top. And then we went into Bellini Avenue in Douglas, and my gran and granda took us in. My uncle moved out of his bedroom into a box room, and then me and my mum, my 2 sisters, 5 years, 2 sets of bunk beds.
In one room, yeah.
That was it. And that was life in 70s Scotland. 70s Dundee.
Yeah. So that takes what up to the 80s. So you got out of the box room in the 80s?
Got out of that, yeah. We moved to Eden Terrace at the bottom of Baxter Park.
Got you, yeah.
Brand new houses at that time. They're now needing knocked in because it's 40 odd years ago and they're a bit of a mess. Went to Gleeblands, then Morgan. And then at that time I was playing football and had the choice between going to uni or following a football career. And I wasn't that good at football and I discovered beer and thought I'll go to uni, it's a better life, and that's what I did.
Yeah. You're a bit of a trainer head as well, so where did you pick up like your interest in trainers?
Same as everybody else in Dundee, mid-80s, not so much casual culture, just that was life at the time. It called something else later on.
Yeah.
But everybody was knocking about in their trainers and their new foreign sports gear, mostly through Liverpool and Aberdeen and Hibs up here. And then Dundee followed suit. And then used to go down to the wee shop. Where was it now? The one at the bottom of Crichton Street there. Wasn't the Manifesto at that time, it was another one. Can't remember what it was
What was
called.
Crichton Street again?
It's where the second-hand shop is now. Round beside McDaniel's, it was beside there. I can't remember what it was called. Was it even Manifesto maybe back then before it moved?
Manifesto was in Whitehall Street.
Yeah, I was in Whitehall.
Same area.
Yeah.
And then that's obviously not there anymore. But just by the time you're getting into the 80s, you had jobs like I worked with my granda in the end. Had a bit of cash to spend on trainers and gear. And
so what was your preferred brand of trainer to go for? Because we're going to speak about some Pumas later on.
I brought some Pumas tonight, but I used to like everybody else, it was more Addy and Puma at the time. But there was also all kinds that, like Diodora and that appeared later on, all kinds of foreign brands. But it was all whatever people were bringing back for Italy and when Liverpool were on the rob and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So where did your Dundee FC love come from? What part of the family? Or was
that was my mum and my uncle used to take me to dens. So I started off in the dairy, sitting on, at the time there was a wee wall at the front when I was a kid. You sat in the dairy on the wall until your feet were too big to fit in the space between that and the advert boards. And then you went and stood, because there was no seats. And then in the late 70s, at that time the dairy was segregated for Aberdeen, United, Old Firm games. The segregation was up the middle of the dairy. And then graduated from there to standing in the dairy. And then took a bit of a turn to be standing out at the end of the dairy now where the pie hut used to be in the open end.
It was quite a lot. It was actually amazing how many could actually fit in that space when you remember it when it was packed out. It always looked like there was tons of people in it.
Yeah, when you look back and look at the crowds at these games now, there was only 10 or 11,000 at the games, but it felt like it was more like 20,000. I don't know if there was a tax dodge going on or whatever, but it always seemed a bit tighter than 10 or 11,000 for especially the Old Firm games. Yeah.
And then you get your job. Where did you go to work first?
I started off in London. I went after I finished uni. Unbelievably, when you get to the later parts, I didn't just get plucked out of the dairy having worked in Sports Direct. I ended up in London. I was a buyer, had a business degree, went to work at Sainsbury's in Blackfriars, and then stayed there for a few years, but there was no EasyJet or Ryanair or anything. Ended up flying home on Friday nights, so it was basically a train out to Heathrow, beers on the plane and up to Edinburgh, and you were just spending your money. And I wasn't saving any money and putting on the weight and drinking too much beer, and that's where I started my career. I was a buyer.
What year was this?
1991.
91, right, okay.
1991. We'll skip the late 80s and go straight past the music scene of the 80s and the late 80s. And
what music were you listening to?
Oh, that time.
Right through. What was your starting point?
I started off. I used to go. There's a few boys in Dundee I used to go to gigs with, but it was people like Marillion and Simple Minds and everything originally. But then I got into Stone Roses, Charlatans and Spiral Carpets because that was the era, late 80s, early 90s.
It's a good era.
Yeah, so it was always in Spiral Carpets, Charlatans, Stone Roses, Happy Mondays.
Did you hear the long hair and stuff at the time?
I had a nice hockey top to go to gigs. Does that count? I was at the GMEX in 1990 on my 20th birthday. There's a t-shirt knocks about, and it's actually got my birthday on it in 1990. I was at that GMEX Happy Mondays gig back in the day. So it's just you just did what everybody else was doing.
What was your favourite band of that era?
My favourite, Stone Roses. Still the Stone Roses.
Yeah,
it's been the Stone Roses ever since they started.
Yeah, I could speak all day about the Stone Roses, man.
Before we get to the nitty-gritty on the Defiant season, what me and you were discussing earlier on, and I think you touched on it, your favourite era watching Dundee was same as mine.
Definitely the 80s.
So sort of maybe 84 to about 87, 88, I think was probably my favourite period. Including, I mean, obviously the Khadija period was great, but it was a different vibe. And the 84, 87 was all Scottish players.
When you say it was a different vibe, do you mean it was a different vibe with the football, a different vibe with the way the club were going?
Oh, everything.
Everything
was different.
Like, so yeah, like, I just like the vibe of football was better.
Well, it wasn't that it was. It wasn't that it was a better vibe. I think the team, because it was a homegrown, basically a Scottish team. They were all Scotsmen, and they were a really, really good team. Even although, as you were saying earlier on, even though United got to the UEFA Cup final, that Dundee team at that time was every bit as good or better at times, you know. And United were coming back, and Dundee were beating them 3-0 that season, and it just was that was the way it was. Dundee had a decent team at that point.
I was talking to my old business partner this morning, who happens to be an Arab, and he's 10 years younger than me, and he couldn't believe that when United won the league and then they got to the UEFA Cup final, Dundee were within the city, no that far behind them, if they were behind them at all, and they never feared playing against United. But before and after, they definitely did. But in 1984, I think, if I remember correctly, we beat United 1-0 at Dens in 79, Sinky with a header. And we didn't beat them again.
5th of November,
Peter
1983.
Guy Fox night at Tannadice, and we won 1-0.
Yeah.
And then, after that, it wasn't the same fear.
No.
Unfortunately, we couldn't stop them winning the league, and they got to the UEFA Cup final. And the history of that will be theirs. But for us, that team with John Bryn, Bobby Connor, Stuart Rafferty, that was an incredible.
None of that team was fair to play in anybody.
No.
See, somebody who didn't live through that era. Like, you only hear about, like, it's their golden days, is it? That's what you hear about it, they won the league. Like, you just think that they dominated that season. Like, you don't know, like, hearing this is kind of, like, weird, because you don't know that Dundee were that close or anything, or they're running Europe especially as well. This is just what you heard.
It was a big shock to me when we lost the Scottish Cup semi-final at Tynecastle. I was absolutely distraught that we didn't beat them that day. But in the, 87 Skull Cup quarter-final at Dens.
We beat them only about 4 or 5 months later.
Yeah,
that was
we
the
beat
thing.
them. We beat them at Dens in front of 20-odd thousand, and at that time you weren't on it. It wasn't unexpected to beat them because they were good.
There was no doubt in my mind the Scottish Cup semi-final against United at Tynecastle. There was no doubt in my mind if Dundee had got to that final and played St Mirren, we'd have won that. Well, because they were getting beat every time. United seemed to have St Mirren were the hoodoo club for United, but they weren't a hoodoo club for us. We were kind of beating them every time we played them, so I was fully expecting to win that cup that year.
Yeah, at that time I was always, United were my second team. Every time they played somebody, when they played St Mirren, they were my second team. Mm-hmm. When they played Motherwell, they were my second team. When they got beat for Celtic, it was the same. You just always want them to lose, but we didn't get the chance to play in that final, and that's probably the worst experience of a single game that you think, oh, I wouldn't want to go back to that game at Tynecastle again, ever.
No, I mean, at half time.
I know that feeling.
There's been a few over the years, but that was a bad one.
Yeah.
At half time, we were winning that game, and it was that slip. It was John Brown slipping in the box, and the equalising. Then they got the winner, and then the two amazing saves that Billy Thompson pulled off with John Brown free kicks. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it is what it is, but that's football, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's not the end of the world.
That is football, man. Yeah. So let's go back to 1991. Your first job, then. Yeah. What was it again?
It was a buyer in Sainsbury's.
Buyer in Sainsbury's, yeah, down in London. After business school. So what was after that then?
Well, I wanted to come home. I'd spent 4 years in London, and I wanted to come up the road. And so I did. I just decided to leave London. And
what was it? You didn't like how busy it was, or? Just imagine London early 90s would have been a vibe.
Do you know, it was quite good, but it wasn't a home, and never really settled. Once you'd done all the tourist things, it was kind of over. You know, at that time I was living just off Fulham Palace Road, which was about 3/4 of a mile away from Stamford Bridge. And as a Dundee supporter, I kind of picked a team when I got there, and it was Chelsea because they were so close Chelsea then went on to be decent. At that time, they were terrible. It was they weren't even always in the top league at the time. So you were able to walk along and just pay in 14 quid, Stamford Bridge, and watch Chelsea.
And the riots that went on in the ground.
There was all kinds of things went on. And when you think about those days, it was probably quite dangerous as well.
Were you at the Middlesbrough game?
I was at loads of games
The riot game?
probably shouldn't have been at.
So yeah, you came down the road then. What was that? What was Dundee like? When was this? 94? Did you say?
Yeah, I came back up the road. I went back up and stayed just outside Edinburgh. Didn't come back to Dundee for a long time. I was coming up to watch Dundee games. I was travelling to Scotland just to watch Dundee.
Really?
Well, yeah, I was watching Chelsea sometimes. Watching all kinds of games. I've watched games across the world, but I was coming up just to watch Dundee some weekends, and that's when you know you should go home. Like just do that and get up the road. So I came up the road and I was working with a few places, but I ended up working with Sports Direct.
A buyer for Sports Direct?
No, I worked in the stores. I actually started working with a company called Heatons, which had a partnership with Sports Direct, a department store in Ireland, all over Ireland. And then Sports Direct bought into them, and then I worked mostly with Sports Direct after that. And then that's how I ended up back in Dundee. Ended up looking after Aberdeen, Overgate and Inverness and a few other Sports Direct places.
That must have been where you met your good lady at that point.
When I was in Northern Ireland, yeah.
And what's Mike Ashley like then?
Actually, he's very good to people. The public persona and what the press say is not what people that work for him would say. Not people that work with him and close to him. He was very, very generous to the people who worked hard for him. Totally different from the
Perception.
The stuff that you read in the papers about minimum wage and all the things that I'm absolutely against.
0 hour contracts and all that.
Sorry?
0 hour contracts and all that.
0 hour contracts they're a bit controversial, but they also provide jobs to people that don't have jobs, and I don't particularly like them. But at the same time, the same guy, if people were in trouble, he would help them, and he was very, very generous to store managers and people who done well for him. And I probably wouldn't say a word against him, having been in his company and met him quite a few times over the years. It was helpful. And again, as I say, generous to people as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
I wouldn't have said that if I was a Newcastle fan. Also,
or Rangers fans hate him as well. I call him the Pablo Escobar of the high street. He's took out so many shops. I'm
terrified that one day he decides to buy Stone Island or something. Cause
he had the rights to it for years.
I know, but it's just a brand. Sometimes you think, oh my God, he's ready to kill another brand.
I think he lost it when Montclair actually got the rights. He had the rights to sell it when I say that in the UK. I think he still has them for CP. That's why they ended up with Sports Direct and stuff. But anyway, so what was it like working for Sports Direct?
It was good. It was when I think about what came next, I would call it honest work. It was real work and people doing real jobs and working hard. We had a bit of a company approach towards shoplifters, for example. That wasn't a good thing. People work in retail, and now it's got worse, I believe, that they put up with an awful lot of things from especially shoplifters, and you weren't allowed to retaliate. But with Sports Direct, they picked up all legal costs, so it was a pretty okay place to work.
It's different now, yeah.
The story, I remember I was needing a mannequin, and I phoned you. And I phoned you, and this was about 2 weeks before everything kicked off with Dundee. And I remember coming up to seeing you, and within 2 weeks, you weren't working for Sports Direct anymore. You were.
That's right. It was a very quick turnaround.
Yeah, you were working for Callum Melville.
So, it wasn't a Callum to begin with, to be fair.
Yeah.
How does this happen then? How are you working in Sports Direct and then all of a sudden you're just working for Dundee?
Well, I used to run a website, Dundee Mad, back in the day.
I remember that website.
Did a very clever job of making sure that all old posts were gone before I took the job at Dens. And Dundee Mad used to get, to put it in perspective, you're talking about 2000, what year was that? When it started off, so 2003, 2004, we were getting 1 million page views a week.
Really?
And that was, like, the internet was big, it was getting big. But it wasn't, if you think what that converts to now, how that might have looked if you had sort of professionalism and other things going on. But at the time we were getting quite a lot of views, and there's a good forum, and people could say their piece, and you could argue on the internet without people getting really nasty to each other and all the things that went with that. And that's really how Dundee came about, because in the first administration, I had plenty to say about Jimmy and Peter, quite critical of how the club was run, despite it ended up being, and I've got a different view on that now, but at the time, quite critical of going into administration, obviously. And then later on, when I got critical before Dundee went into administration the second time, I was critical of Callum Melville and the board and the people who were running the club. And then I got a phone call one day from Callum Melville to say, if you think you're that clever, why do you not come and do it yourself? And I said, okay, I'll do that.
Is that actually what you said?
Basically what happened. Aye.
Really?
He called me and he said, do you want to talk about it? You've got plenty to say. So I took him on, invited him down to the house. Wife made soup and sandwiches. Callum came to the house, pulled up outside in his Bentley in my wee house in the middle of Dundee.
He's in jail now, right?
No, he's not.
Was he in jail?
I don't think so. I think he maybe should be, but that's neither here nor there. But he turned up outside the house. I lived in McVickers Lane at the time. You remember the house there? And he pulled down to the house in his Bentley and came up for soup and sandwiches. And we had a good chat. I'll tell you what happened next, but on that day, he then drove off and sent flowers to say thank you for the lunch and that, and then didn't pay his petrol bill in the station on the Kingsway. And then the police came to the door because he hadn't paid. He'd bought a whole load of it, just filled up with fuel and drove off.
And you got the flowers through there as well, probably.
But who knows? It was just one of them things. There was probably a sign right there, but what happened next was he listened to what I had to say, and I'd actually told him there was a lot of things. I've still got it, and we can talk about that in a bit if you want, but I've still got the business plan I wrote at that time, and I had to go in and I did an interview with Bob Brannan and with George Knight to go in as business development manager at Dundee Football Club. And as soon as they offered it, I accepted, because I wanted to go, and that means for all of us, it's you think it's my club, so I'm going to take the job. And little did I know what would happen next.
So this is 2 weeks before the administration hit?
No, it was March. It was about March, middle of March of that year. So it was about 6 or 7 months before administration came. Because there was a lot of things, we can talk about that as well, because nobody ever talks about what happened the year before administration.
Okay.
What happened? What happened next was that when I wrote the business plan about what I saw as a supporter, and and I still think it now, Dundee fans have not been treated well by successive boards for certainly the 50 years that I've watched the club. The standard of what you get for what you pay has been pretty grim over the piece. Now, you could say that's football, but other clubs have progressed, other clubs have done other things and involved their fans. Dundee didn't really do that over the years, and we missed the trick because we were as big, if you like. It's no aspirational to be as big as United, but it was something that we were, and we missed the chance to really capitalise on the 80s, and then in the 90s we went downhill and we were back in the first division and playing in the Alba Cup and that sort of thing. But the club never paid heed to the fans, and that was mostly what I had to say. And then when I went in, the job was business development manager, which was meant to bring in extra commercial revenue and do things to get fans on side. But when I went in, it was just an absolute mess, and progressed from there to doing other things within the club, including looking at how the wages were structured and what the first team looked like, and the running costs. Because for all the bad things people will ever say about Callum, nobody really remembers he was putting in £100,000 every month to keep Dundee going before administration, and that was for 16 months in a row. So, that was a commitment. The man didn't have any shares in the club. He just put the money in. He wasn't wanting anything. And some of the things that he'd done were absolutely bonkers, but that was his money, I suppose, and everybody went along with it. So that's where they were. So that summer, the summer before administration, or before the Defiant season, I got the job of looking, I think by that time, I think they changed my title to something else, like commercial director or something like that. But it didn't really make any difference because the job was still the same. I still got paid the same money I did when I started. And I was tasked with trying to cut the wage bill that summer because they clearly couldn't keep relying on £100,000 of external money every month to pay the bills. And
is this just because of the state the first administration has left the club in?
No, it was because, in a way, they didn't have anybody with money running the club. Most people forget the era of Scottish football at that time is nearly every club from Morton, Dunfermline, Ayr United, all the people who criticised Dundee in the Defiant season were all reliant on a benefactor. Whether it be Dunfermline, it was the guy who was at Bank of Scotland or Royal Bank of Scotland. At Morton, it was the guy that was selling sweeties to kids, the guy that had the millions, the wee sweeties. They all had somebody that was paying in a lot of money. And Dundee didn't have that. They advertised for somebody, and that's how they got Callum Melvin through an advert in the paper. They went out looking for somebody that would put money in. So there's no, from me, there's no criticism other than the naivety of getting involved in that. And Bob Brannan doesn't like me calling them naive. He went mental about that years ago, but me and Bob have kissed and made up about that long time ago. But they were naive and they thought the money would last forever. And actually, other than Callum's businesses run into a problem in September that year, which was 4 weeks before Dundee went into administration, it probably would have always run like that. But my job became looking at the wages of the first team and fixing that as quickly as possible. And in that summer, if you look back, we had high earners like Tony Bullock in the goal and people who shouldn't have been anywhere near Dundee's first team but getting a lot of money for being there. And I managed to get the wage bill down by about 17 grand a week, which was £850,000 a year. And that was in the summer. That was before administration ever came near. But by that time, it was beginning to be clear that the club could only survive with Callum's money. In the format that it was in.
So when did you realise that it was... I mean, it all happened that quick. It was that Cowdenbeath game on Saturday. There were rumours started going about the fact, but we were on the terrace and the rumours were going about that there's big problems here, and then obviously we got beat.
So how far was the Cowdenbeath game into the season?
It wasn't long in.
It wasn't long in,
no. It was a few weeks.
I remember the Cowdenbeath game pretty well. But the reality for Dundee was that Dundee was both small enough to go after from the authorities and not big enough to survive it without drastic measures, and drastic measures was administration, the second administration. And that was the only way to survive because, as I said earlier on, Callum's business had run into problems in September, and within 4 weeks Dundee were in trouble. And it was simply because that money just couldn't be there. And that was the beginning of Callum beginning to tell what I would call now untruths. I'm not sure I want to call them lies, but they're no far off. And he was telling them to the taxman. And that was a very, very dangerous time because he was, on one hand, offering to write a cheque, to write off. And it was only, people forget that Dundee were in trouble for 300 grand. It wasn't millions and millions and millions. It was £300,000 that was causing the problem. And it was because it was to HMRC. And HMRC had taken a line with Scottish football. Enough was enough. Dundee were too small to anybody care about other than Dundee fans, and they weren't big enough to look after themselves. And that's why Dundee was the target.
So after the Cowdenbeath game, it was in the space of maybe two. It was always, for me, it was always that 2-3 weeks. You suddenly went from back out of the view, right into the hard helmet on time. Yeah,
I mean, that was never the intention, but when it became clear that they were very much, and bear in mind at that time I was still not involved in those decisions. I wasn't even on the board. I was getting involved in trying to cut wages and stuff. But at that time, then they started meeting with lawyers because it was time that they had to meet with lawyers and make sure that everything was done properly. And at that time, there was a very, very nice man in Dundee called Jack Robertson who was at Thornton's, and he was advising specifically the club, or specifically me, within the club, on what to do and how we could get through that legally and start the process, because the money was not going to be there. And I think Bob had enough, and D for Life didn't have any money and that sort of thing. And then it sort of moved rapidly from then. And then administration was coming. We tried 2 different people for administration. I can't remember who the first one was, a bit more famous than Brian Jackson was. But then we managed to get PKF, and then that was when it began, because we'd done a deal with PKF that they would do it for a fixed fee, and they wouldn't actually do the work. The work would happen within the club and people at the club, which was only going to be me and the team that was left. They would actually do the work, and then administrators would do the background stuff away from the club. And that's what happened, and we got it for a fixed fee, and it was only that made it possible. Because had the administrators wanted, I think they wanted 100,000. If they'd wanted 200,000 or 300,000, we didn't have the money for it, and it would have been the end of Dundee Football Club. But the administrators were willing to do it for 100 grand as long as they didn't have to do any work. Which is crazy when you think about it now.
This whole thing is crazy, to be honest with you, trying to add it all up. Like, so Callum's businesses, basically, he had some of his businesses, the club didn't get that 100,000.
And there's the thing, you know, when people look back, they say, why did they get involved? Callum Melville was the Grampian Industrialist of the Year in that year. You know, we had good businesses, but I don't know what it was built on exactly. So, and I think that's the stuff that they never really dug into when they brought him on to the board. But they weren't the only people believing the legend or the myth of Callum Melville. Grampian businesses, and you bear in mind the kind of businesses up in Aberdeen, these people voted them as the Grampian Industrialist of the Year. So it wasn't just the Dundee board that went down that road.
But what you said earlier on there, it just shows you that the man's money, he spent well over £1 million. And he kind of saved the club for a long time before you got left with it.
I don't know about saving the club. I think they needed the money to run the club.
Yeah.
But the decisions within that, and who to go after and sign, and how they portrayed themselves in public, if you remember the nonsense about wanting to buy Scott Robertson from United. And there are some things I think I've showed you before, Steve, but I don't normally talk about it. But if you look at the board minutes from pre-administration, you had Callum at board meetings saying things like, here's a list of players that are available in the summer from my son's championship manager game. And that's minuted in Dundee FC's board minutes. Can you imagine? Yeah. And then we tried to sign some of those players.
Really?
But the weird thing is now a lot of clubs use the actual championship managers to track players down.
But that was the, you know, that's some of the things that would curl your toes. You know, you couldn't make that up. It's just, but it's in the board minutes. So those things were going on, and it had to come to a crashing halt, and it did.
Going to the administration, like, see when it first happened, obviously Billy Dodds and Chisholm were away. Was it you that had to sack them?
No, for Gordon Chisholm and Billy Dodds, and I'd like to come to those two if it's okay with you in a minute. The administrator met with those two. Right, I met with a lot of players. We divided up between me and Brian Jackson to go and talk to people. But I got
that must have been a horrible experience.
Of course. The fact that people were losing their jobs is it's actually horrific, you know. But it was probably worse than that, because you know, and I don't mean this in a nasty way towards footballers, but footballers who are getting paid £1,500 a week, for me, they should have a few quid to get them through. I was more bothered about the £40 a week part-time girl in the accounts office who was also losing their jobs because they didn't have money for groceries that Friday. And that was more of a problem for
I remember me and you talking about that at the time.
Yeah, and at the time when that happened, I was absolutely apoplectic with rage with Callum, and drove up to his house and sat outside his house in Aberdeen until I got a brown envelope full of cash to go and pay the people who weren't players to make sure they could get their groceries on a Friday. Because they didn't have any money, you know. It was £40 a week or £60 a week or £100 a week is not the same as £1,500 a week. And as much as I felt sorry for the players, and I really did, and it's a terrible thing, and people shouldn't be losing their jobs because other people can't do their jobs properly, But for those people who couldn't go grocery shopping, that was worse.
So you're feeling the weight of the whole club with us, yeah?
At that time, yeah, but that time I'd made my mind up to take that weight though. That was my choice. I could have walked away and do you think you've lost years off your life because of that? Certainly lost 2 years of savings. don't know about my life. Do you know what? It was the worst of times, but I wouldn't change it. I would still back myself to go in and help, and it was only help. There was no help. People haven't heard from me in 15 years. This is not about saying this or that. This is actually something. Part of the reason I want to talk about this now is to put the record straight, partly on behalf of the people who did do the jobs. And I'm not talking about just the players, because the players go to events and we all know what the players done. The players were fantastic. But nobody talks about Ali or Lorraine and Neilson in office and Verity in the front office and Graham James, the commercial manager at the time, Jim Thompson. Nobody talks about all these people and them turning up to their work when they didn't know they were going to get paid. They didn't know that I was going to turn up for Callum's house and be able to give them their wages, because they thought they weren't getting wages, and they came in despite that. And I'll probably miss some names, but Alison McQueen as well. All kinds of people who were doing their jobs under threat of losing their jobs, but still turned up for their work. And they weren't footballers. They were ordinary working people who just needed to buy their groceries. And that was bigger for me. That was a thing.
Yeah, that's that's described in a way that you never think about.
The thing was, it was what Chris said earlier on, 2 weeks. I've always said that. It always felt to me like you came into the limelight, and within 2 weeks, Callum's gone. And you've got this big weight around your neck.
But that had to be the deal.
Yeah.
I had 100% confidence of being able to fix it within the boundaries of the administration, but everybody else had to go. It was that simple for me, that we couldn't. When people look back now, and I'm quite Marmite for some Dundee fans, they put me as being responsible for it, which is a bit strange because I only got the job 6 weeks before it happened. But I can live with that. I put my head up to take on the role.
I've argued with loads of people about that as well.
What we've picked up for documenting this is, especially in the Barry Smith podcast, is how much your name got mentioned to the questions that I was like, how did you do this? How did you do this? How did you do this? And he was like, oh, Harry done it.
That's just generous of Barry, to be honest. There's loads of people involved, and my part was tiny, really tiny. I knew what to do on the business side. What I didn't know what to do with was dealing with the press, for example. I had no clue how to deal with the press. Ended up having to take decisions on things that...
They're always looking for somebody to blame, aren't they?
Yeah, I didn't mind that because we survived. That's the bit I always come back with in the end. We're still here.
Well, see, the bit we were speaking about was before the 25-point deduction, is it?
Absolutely. And and I know it's going to sound terrible and probably the only sort of big-headed thing I'll ever say. I didn't trust anybody else to do it. I was quite bullshit. I knew that I could stick up for the club. I knew I was big enough and ugly enough to take all the rubbish that would come my way. But if Dundee Football Club survived, that's all that mattered, because that was, got a Dundee tattoo there, Dundee tattoo there. That's all about being able to affect something for your club. I couldn't take the field and win football matches, but I could certainly back them and do everything I could to make sure the team could take the field and win football matches. And that was massively important for us because, I don't know what you want to talk about, but the administrator didn't want to put that team on the pitch. He wanted to put 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kids on the pitch. And I don't think the outcome's the same if that happens.
Well, I remember you phoning me up and just come up the boardroom. I want to show you something. It was when you were having to deal with the team, the players you were thinking about. You had to cut the cloth. So I remember you sitting down, showing me the list and me going, all right then. And it was you'd made the right decision you definitely made the right decision on the players that were going to save the club.
I think it was important for the football club. I genuinely, if you think about what happened next, the fans there's not criticism of the fans, but in the first administration, the fans raised over £500,000 quite easily. Like, not easily, but they'd done a lot of things to get £500,000. In the administration 2, they couldn't raise £150,000 to get the shares. They didn't have it. And they never managed it. And they still didn't manage it at the end. They still didn't get to that point. But if you think about it like that, how excited would people have been to watch 18-year-olds get beat 6 or 7-0 every week? I didn't think it was a possibility for the club to get through that. So I met with, we can talk about how the team was picked if you like, it's quite straightforward.
There was 13, was this the 13-man squad, yeah? Yeah,
it was about that, yeah. But there was a few young boys in that never get a mention who you know, people like Conor McLeod and Alan Tullith and a few others that nobody remembers now. There was 43 players that season.
43?
43.
Was that with Trilas?
Yeah, 43 people played for Dundee Football Club that year, give or take.
That's a number I've not heard on that before. No.
10 of them played over 35 games. And the rest played bits and bobs.
See, before we get into it, like, just going on a bit when you had to go and get the cash for the calm and that, and it's just like, these people are scared for their jobs and stuff, but like, the 25-point deduction is a way to come as well. Like, I can't imagine a world without Dundee Football Club in it. And like,
me neither.
For thousands and thousands of other people, it's just like...
There was two defining moments for me. Well, we could talk about how the players were picked after, but there's two things happened. One was an interview with Jim Spence on the BBC. Yeah. It was a camera in my face, and Jim Spence said directly to my face, and he caught me unawares. We can talk about the press in a minute, but Jim Spence said to me, is Dundee Football Club going into liquidation? And I said out loud, no, not on my watch. That was my reply. Because I really believed that we wouldn't. As long as we could do the things that I wanted to do, we wouldn't disappear. It just wasn't going to happen.
Defiant for the start.
Absolutely, but that's our culture, you know. And honestly, there's probably 20 people could have been picked to do the same job that I'd done, but I could take the stuff on my shoulders, okay, and I could just cope with it. The second thing was that shortly after the administration, about 200 people turned up outside Dens one night. Don't know if you know that or not, or if you've ever... nobody seems to mention it anymore, which is good. But about 200 people turned up at Dens, outside Dens, and it's one of them ones you're thinking they're going to be outside with flaming torches and pitchforks, you know, like running you out of town. And Jim Thompson, he comes and he says, "Oh, there's a big crowd outside." I said, "Well, okay, what are they wanting?" He says, "They're angry." And I said, "Right, okay, go and put the tea on." We had a big thing to make tea. He says, "Go and put that on, invite them all in to the enclosure under the stand, bring them in." And he said, "You can't do that." I said, "I can do that." He says, "Open the doors and let them in." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because they're just like me. They're Dundee supporters and they're worried about their club. So the least I can do for a couple of hours is stand here and answer their questions and see what happens." And that's what we did. We invited them in, gave them a cup of tea, and stood for 2 hours and answered their questions. And the pitchforks went away and the flaming torches went away. And I think everybody who was there understood that we were going to be okay. Or maybe didn't know we were going to be okay, but answered their fears. Because they were just scared. They weren't just angry, they were scared about their club. And a lot of people were scared that we'd lose Dundee Football Club. And that's when, for me, I thought, right, for these people, you've got to just do your best now. And that was it. But everybody bought into it. It wasn't me, it was Ali King and Lorraine Noble and Lorraine Anderson and Ali McLean and Ailsa and Verity, all the people I was talking about earlier on, and specifically Graham James. You know, nobody talks about Graham anymore, but I think on Barry's podcast he mentioned that the players missed their Christmas night out and it cost them money. What he didn't say is on the second night they went out that Graham had gone and went to businesses and we'd gone out and actually just asked for money and were able to hand Gary Harkins an envelope so the players could enjoy their second night out, because that was the kind of thing that we'd done. We got some money for paintballing and sent them, you know, when Barry needed a wee bit for the morale, we just gathered up a few quid from people that we knew in businesses and just sent them out for days out. And that's how you get through it.
How did you get through it? Sounds like the weight of the world would have been on your shoulders. The 25-point deduction when this gets hit, because you're in motion, you're trying to do what you can, and then you've just been like, it's just like a shotgun shot out of nowhere.
How I got through it was I couldn't have been prouder than being in the position I was in, that I could help the club, because it was my club. Like, Stevie's known me for I don't know how many years. When I talk about Dundee Football Club, I talk about people like Willie Riley, or I don't know if you know the boy, but I don't even know his name. There's another one called Swivelhead that used to be on the D Club bus, and he had this big scarf with all the badges on. It's for them people, the 60 people that have been at Queen of the South on a Tuesday night, the Ellen Bank Bar, who, when I lived in Belfast, we were playing Stranraer away, and I got the ferry to Cairnryan, and had a 5-mile walk to get from Cairnryan round to Stranraer for the game, and the Ellen Bank Bar saw me as I were driving past in the bus and stopped and took me round. It's for them people, being in that position to do something for them and to help my club survive. Yeah, that's what got me through. It was probably the arrival for me in my working life of the moment that everything else built towards, just to that moment, and then it was there. So we just got on with it.
Good answer. Just before we go into that, I'll take you back to Chisholm and Dodds. You wanted to mention something about them.
I do want to mention about Gordon Chisholm and Billy Dodds, because I've mentioned this to people individually, because I don't do interviews, and I never have done interviews until this one. Chisholm and Dodds came in, and they still do come in for a lot of abuse for their decision to vote against the CVA. They only voted against it after coming to see me and making sure that it was going to be okay, no matter how they voted. They came and made sure that Dundee would be okay before they voted against it, because they didn't want to put Dundee under. They wanted to make a protest about how they lost their jobs. Now, I know that Billy's said a few things over the piece later on. I remember I was driving in the car one day, and United were playing at Tannadice against Celtic, and he was on the radio, and somebody was talking to him about how he lost his job, and he absolutely crucified me. And I phoned him and said, do you want to have a cup of tea and talk about it? And he wouldn't have come. And I would still have a cup of tea with Doddsy now if you wanted to talk about it. The two of them did not try to kill Dundee Football Club, not by any stretch of the imagination. And I've said that loads of times to individuals, but I've just never had the opportunity to say it out loud. And I don't mind giving Doddsy abuse because he played for United or anything else, but he never tried to kill Dundee Football Club.
He slagged his ears before.
Well, I drew them.
But that's okay. That's all right. But I think it's one of them things that needs to be put straight before we're all too old to remember what really happened.
Yeah.
Because they did check first before they voted against it. And I've said that.
That's good of you. It's good of you to get to say that, yeah.
Especially when they crucified me. But they weren't the only ones. I mean, there's other people crucified me as well.
Was there anything else you got the blame for?
Colin McMenamin. I got the blame for Colin McMenamin. We didn't keep Colin McMenamin after the administration. I don't know if you want me to talk about how we decided on who was staying and who was going, because we ended up with a pretty decent team. And that happened because I didn't believe that we could have kids. I didn't think it would work. So I met with Brian Jackson at I don't know if you know it, I think it's called the Riverside. It's a white restaurant just at the roundabout at Stirling. If you don't go towards Glasgow and you come off to the left.
I do know it, yeah.
It's a big it's a kind of, I wouldn't call it a motorway restaurant exactly, but it's a big restaurant there. And I took a list of what I wanted to keep as a team, based purely on opinion. I want to kiddie on that it was the start of Jamestown Analytics, but it wasn't. It was looking at players as individuals, and I felt so bad about some of the players we were going to let go. People like Eric Payton, for example. I don't know if you remember Eric.
Yep.
Eric was a really good right back. So this is a bit of an example of how players were picked, if you like. Had the list. I think I showed you at the time the list of what players were, and I didn't show you their wages, but
no.
I knew in myself where everybody was in the wages and where they played. And Eric, I thought, was a better right back than Gary Irvine was. But Gary Irvine could play in midfield, and he could also play on the right. If you needed to, Gary Irvine could play on the right wing. Eric could play right back. And Eric was missing for 20 games of the previous season with a bad shoulder. So it was looking at how often did he play? How often did he get injured? How often did he get suspended? How many positions can they play? And what's their relative wages to each other? And well, I went through every single position and done exactly the same thing. And that's how we ended up with the team, because I went with Brian Jackson. I went to Brian Jackson with the list. But before I went to Brian, I didn't pick Sean Higgins. I didn't have Sean Higgins in the list. Which, when you think about what a big part Higgy played in that season, I'd actually picked Colin McMenamin to stay. And that was, it had to be between Higgy and McMenamin. And the reason I picked Colin to stay was the same reason I picked Gary Irvine, was that Colin McMenamin could play in midfield, he could play on the right and he could play up front. Higgy couldn't have played in midfield and he couldn't have played on the right, or I didn't think he could. But before I took the list to Brian Jackson, I went and seen 3 or 4 people who I trusted within football and showed them the list. Football people, not people like Stevie, who doesn't really know anything about football, to be fair. But I went and talked to professionals on the basis that they would always remain anonymous and I would never say who they were. And I've never said, you don't know who they are, I've never said who they were. And every single one of them that I went to recommended that we keep Sean Higgins instead of Colin McMenamin. And the reason that they all gave was that if we were losing, Sean Higgins would be better around the place. Simple as that.
Okay.
And I didn't know that. I couldn't see that from outside. I hadn't been in the dressing room, didn't know the people. And so, of all the people that we had and all the positions that I'd gone through, that was the one where the recommendation from others was not to do it. And so I listened and changed it. And never told anybody, which meant if you read the book, I think McMenamin goes through me for a shortcut. He spoke about it out loud a few times. He's told plenty of people basically how nasty, somehow I didn't like him. I actually picked him to stay. But I managed to speak to Colin at the Queen of the South game. We got beat in the last game of the season, 3-0 down there. Everybody was half cut, I think.
That was it, that game.
Aye, but it was, I think the team I'm talking about were they.
Oh,
we never really played at all that day. Nobody was bothered, which was a bit of a shame. I laugh with Barry about it now, because had we won that game, we would have picked up more points that season than Dunfermline did. But we didn't. But I finally got a word with Colin, because I think, just to put the record straight a wee bit with him, to say, look, it was nothing personal at all. It was simply a choice, and I took the choice. I take the blame. I picked the team to go forward with, and then I went and argued with Brian Jackson for about 3 hours and wanted to keep them, because can you imagine an administration, and I get a lot of criticism for this, not from Dundee fans but from outside people. We kept Harkins and Griffiths and Forsyth, and the team that went on to do pretty well that season, we managed to keep them all, and got a lot of criticism for that, but I'm pretty okay with that now.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's, you know what, I find that it's a bit crazy decision. Like, you couldn't imagine that season without him now, but the morale in the dressing room would have been a key thing for what you were going through.
There was a lot of things happened that season, and nothing to do with me. It's all to do with Barry and the coaching staff and the players and how they come together. But they didn't get injured. They didn't get suspended. Nobody missed games for phantom reasons. You know, the core of the team, I think the average amount of games they played was 35 and a half games. You know, and I've got a list of that. I'm quite I've got a lot of stats on all kinds of things, but I like that sort of thing. And I recently listed them for myself to just double check, you know, and I think Gary Harkins missed 45 minutes in an entire season. Really? You know, and that was probably because he was taken off with like 2 games to go or something. It wasn't because he was missing. And that's the things people, I think that's why when those guys come out onto a stage, that's why they deserve the round of applause they get and the sort of hero status, you know, that they have, and totally because they didn't miss games. And it went like that. People were playing, I mean, you know, the ones you know about are things like Higgy playing with a steak inside of his boot. Yeah, you know, that, yeah. And then when he scored in that game, he gets done with a fork and knife to eat the steak. Yeah. You know, kidding on, he's going to eat the steak in his boot, and people kind of take that away from us now. Those are the memories that stick with you.
the key games that people go, like, we spoke about the Wraith game, obviously, because of Craig and that, but there's so many, like, one of the things I want to know is, you had 13 boys, right? And then all the trial lists that you got in, like signed for Downfield and all this, like, this must have been like a weekly occurrence. Like, how could we fill these spots? Or, like, how stressful was that for the start?
Anybody that knows me knows I'm quite belligerent in my work, and I don't take kindly to being told what we can and can't do. So, Scottish League, there's a lot of things the Scottish League did. Specifically David Longmuir, who I believe to this day tried to kill Dundee Football Club, and he's welcome to sue me. I'll happily see him in court, and I'll take the evidence with me.
Is it him that gave her the 25 points?
It wasn't just him. That wasn't as far as I'm concerned, and I'll say this out loud probably for the first time, the only honest man in that room was Jim Leishman, because Jim Leishman reclused himself from the proceedings because he thought Dunfermline could win the league that year. So he took himself away and wouldn't get involved. But the rest of them, despite being presented with the evidence that Dundee were actually acting in a far more fair, because they came out with all sorts that we were spending too much and all that. They didn't take account of the facts. The facts were it was a £300,000 debt to HMRC. That was it. Weren't they paying over the odds? They were not paying loads and loads of money to players. That's just the nonsense. There wasn't anybody getting rich playing for Dundee, I'll tell you that much. And these clubs, Morton and others, especially Morton, who had a lot to say, they were all millions, literally millions of pounds in their accounts. And I took their accounts to them on the appeal. I didn't take them the first time because I didn't want to antagonise them. I didn't see the 25 points coming. But on the appeal, I took all their accounts with me to show them that each of them, Dunfermline were £10 million down at the time. Morton were £2.5 million down. Dundee were 350 grand down. So, while they all wanted to throw stones at Dundee, they also refused to come to meetings. I offered them a commercial partnership when we were surviving, invited them all to Dens to come to a commercial meeting and do things together, look at TV deals and whatnot, and they all refused. They didn't want to get involved in any of that. But they didn't act honestly in their dealings with Dundee Football Club, and they wanted to kill Dundee. Simple as that, as far as I'm concerned. And people say, oh, you're just angry, or you're just, no. Dundee did not, the players and the staff that were left did not deserve 25 points. But it wasn't enough. So it's not a laughing matter because people lost their jobs, but they tried to kill us and they didn't manage to do it. And that's thanks to the staff and the players and the manager.
This is one of the key points we're going to get in. They did try to kill us,
100%, yeah. People don't say it out loud, but I don't say it out loud because I don't do interviews. But I've got to I've kept quiet for 15 years, but they definitely tried to kill Dundee Football Club. And when you saw what was going on, and the history books can show it because there's a file exists. I've got all the paperwork, all the communications, everything. It's sitting. I signed it over to the Dundee FC Historical Trust some time ago to Jim Mitchell. Don't know if you know Jim. You know Jim.
Yeah, I know Jim very well, yeah.
I signed it over to the Historical Trust in case I died, because I didn't want it to disappear into the... Just be forgot about. And while I'm alive, there's only me and Alan Patillo, the journalist, can take them out of the Historical Trust if we want to, if we were going to write a book or something like that about it. Because everything's there, all the details, all the conversations, all the things they said, all the stuff they spoke about, I kept it all, and it's all in the Historical Trust for the future. If so go knock on their door if I happen to get hit by a bus, and everything will be revealed.
Is that the famous blue folder?
It's a blue folder. It's quite you've seen it. It's quite a thick folder, but I've also got every board minute, every meeting note, everything all sits. And it's there because at one time I have spoke to Alan Patillo in the past about maybe writing a book and giving that money to youth development or something, because it's not something I want to profit from, and especially not in my lifetime. But I didn't want it to disappear from history, especially if I died somewhere along the line.
Yeah, no. I think this story is really important. This is why, we're so keen on getting as much info on it as possible. Right, so the 25 points gets hit, right? As you just said, they've tried to kill our club. Did that galvanise more people around? Did that make you more determined?
I don't think it made us more determined. For about 20 minutes, it was quite a shock. You know, it was
kicking the balls.
There's a few press things, and I mean, this is something that you probably regret inviting me, because I could probably talk about it till tomorrow morning. The press were quite good with us, the local press specifically, because when I got the job, I gathered them up and told them that I hadn't a clue what I was doing. I knew what I was doing on the football side and on the business side, but I had no idea how to talk to the press. So I gathered them at Dens and said to them, and there's some of them are still friendly with now, Big Robert Thompson for the Sun, or Sean, Tom Duthie, Neil Robertson, a few of them. I'll still, if I go to Dens and I go to the back of the stand, I'll sit and have a blether with them now. But I just said to them, I haven't got a clue how to deal with you boys. I don't know what to do with you. So you need to get me through this. You need to talk me through how I deal with you. But if you ever do anything behind us, then I'll never talk to you again. And you'll get nothing. And it was their jobs, you know, to get stuff from the two football clubs in the city. And they were fair. They talked me through how to deal with the press, how to deal with the especially the visual media, you know, Sky Sports and BBC and STV. I had no idea. I've got a face for the radio. I didn't want to be on the telly. But they talked me through how to get through it. And so when the 25 points came, it was quite easy to talk about and actually just deal with it. I didn't think, I felt that they wanted to kill the club, but we had the squad and the players and the attitude that wasn't going to happen. And then we went out and didn't lose any football matches. And that really stuck in their throat as far as I'm concerned. You know, we got to, you'll not know, but there was an end of year, the sort of player of the year thing at the end of the year. Dundee players and managers got nothing. Nothing. When they went to that. And I was sitting next to Barry, and there was a few of our players were up for awards, but they never got anything. And you saw Longmuir and Jim Ballantyne at Airdrie and that sitting, you know, whacking through bottles of whiskey and that at the tables, and you just thought, I didn't want to be sitting with these people. They tried to kill our football club, and the players couldn't stomach it. We turned up because I think Sparky had been up for a young player or something. I don't think he got it, which is absolutely astonishing when you think about it. That they didn't get any awards. Nobody. Can you imagine that team?
Season? There's not one more.
Record-breaking season.
So Barry never even got manager of the year.
Nope, he did not. No, he didn't get it.
Well, I got manager of the year that year.
Probably the Fairman manager, because they won the league. But I mean,
that's funny. I never knew that.
Which football person wouldn't give that manager of the year to Barry Smith?
Oh, exactly. That's what I mean. I just assumed that was what.
No. So we went to support the people who were nominated, knowing fine rightly we weren't going to win anything. So that's how Scottish football was treating us at the time. And they can say all sorts, but the reality is when you read what they said, it's things like, you can't treat HMRC like a credit card. Well, my question was, why not? Because it doesn't say in the rules that you can't treat HMRC like a credit card, and every single football club in Scotland was behind with their HMRC payments. But Dundee were of a size, had they went after East Fife or Forfar or something, nobody would have cared. It would have just vanished. It would have been none. But Dundee Football Club was a target that was big enough, because it was historically a big club. I haven't won anything in 50 years. But there's a lot of people who, especially in this city, who put their heart and soul into that football club, and it would be heartbreaking for them to lose it. Just because we're no Rangers or Celtic, you know, that doesn't mean we feel any less about our club than they do about theirs. Mm-hmm. And that was a problem for them, because they didn't know what would happen next with us.
It just proved them all wrong to the start.
Yeah, and that's down to having. I can't even look at these strips. When I look at them and I think about that red and white strip, to me is just Sean Higgins. You know, it just is Sean Higgins.
For me, see, like, I have never seen a player worn one ever. Like, as far as I was aware, they were all sent. We got told they got sent to Africa and all this sort of stuff. I have never seen one before. So yeah, that's the special thing to actually, like, a time capsule from that period.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, Well, I mean, I don't know if it'll be something you can keep in your podcast, but I brought these 3 strips for a reason. What I would like you to do, because I know you do your thing in your shop and that, I'd like you to try and auction these or sell the 3 of them, and I'd like you to split the money between Dundee Youth Development and Dundee Burns. If you will do that for us, because I'm 57 next year, and there's nowhere for them to go. So especially the one that nobody can get. But I'd quite, if somebody can give, if we could find a way to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, no, we'll get something like that sorted.
Split it down the middle between the 2 things.
Yeah,
that would work for me.
Always looking to help out.
Absolutely.
So let's delve into the games, like the mentality of the games. Right, so 25-point deduction. Who was the first game after that?
Still in Albion.
There we go. Right, so
we went 1-1, 2-1, 3-1 in the first 3 games.
I said that to Barry. You didn't remember at the time. You remember that game? The Stirling Albion fans were brilliant. They actually raised money for Dundee and they got relegated.
They were, yeah. And the funny thing was, I still talk with Paul Goodwin now, who was the Stirling Albion were fans owned at that time, and I'd already made the decision I wasn't going to be mixing with the boardrooms of Scottish football until we were all right. And I didn't sit in the boardroom that day. I went in and said hello politely, because you have to do that. And then I walked round and sat in with the Dundee supporters, and the 1,100 Dundee supporters turned up that day. And actually that was, for me, it was right after we went into administration, but it was probably our worst performance of the season. We only got a 1-1 draw with Stirling. But I can understand.
Sparky scored that day, didn't he?
He did, aye.
Yeah.
But there's there's a few the pictures of me that exist that day, and I've stayed clear. I always told Davy Young to stop taking pictures, but there's ones of that day sitting in with the fans at Stirling.
Yeah, that's special, that, to be fair. So when was the first time you had to get sort of trialists in? Who was the first trialist that came in?
Oh, there was a lot of trialists, and most of there's no great deal of story to most of the trialists. Most of the trialists were contacts of Barry's or people within the club. With people like I think the one that most galled them was probably Jake Hyde, because Jake. What you couldn't do was bring in a cross-border trialist. You weren't allowed to bring trialists across the border of international football, and so they put a signing ban on, which was a bit bonkers, because there was people out of work. So part of my argument is, if you go into an administration as a business and people are made redundant or whatever, the first thing that everybody wants to be able to do is find employment for the people who lost their jobs. Now, it didn't take a great deal of imagination to imagine that with a decent team on the pitch and 5,000 or 6,000 people turning up, we would start to generate enough money to sort the club out. At that point, for me, you should be allowed to go to people who haven't got jobs and offer them jobs, whether they be players that used to play for you or other players who haven't got jobs. And don't think about them as players, think about them as people who can't pay their bills. And the Scottish League didn't want that. The idea was that you couldn't assign anybody. So we had to figure out how that would work, and then they came up with you could have a trialist, but you could only have them for 3 games. So that's when we started writing lists of who could we get, who was available, who could come in and play. And all sorts of things happened. I mean, Jake had played with Matty Lockwood down in England, and Matty had brought Jake to the table and says, "We've got this. I've got Jake. He's playing at Barnet, or he's not getting a game at Barnet." But he was cross-border, so we couldn't get him. And then we went to one of our friendly junior clubs because they were in Scotland and they were over the border. So it just made sense to me that we couldn't bring them in unless they played for or signed with a Scottish club, and that's what we done. They signed for Scottish clubs, and we got them on trial. And to be fair, if you think about somebody like Jake didn't have a football club. Jake played for us for 3 games, then signed for Dunfermline and won the league.
Yeah, I remember.
So that's a guy who didn't have a job getting a job because he come and played for 3 games. But that was just how it was going to work. And most of them, there's not a great deal a story to most of them. But that was it. The cross-border thing was the problem. So it was always going to be that they had to sign for somebody and then come and play for Dundee.
Whose idea was Neil McCann?
Barry's. I didn't know Neil. That was Barry's idea. And do you know, Neil McCann's another one that he gets a bit of stick from Dundee supporters. Let me tell you about Neil McCann. Neil McCann wouldn't even take 50 quid after his third game to take his wife for a meal. I offered him money to go and take his missus for a meal to say thank you, and he wouldn't take it because the club should have the money. And so when I go to watch Dundee against Kilmarnock, or people criticise Neil when he was a manager at Dens, I'm astonished because you know more, obviously, but you wouldn't take a penny.
To be fair, the game last season, it wasn't him that was getting the stick, it was Billy Dodds.
Right. So, but again, does Doddsy deserve it? Yeah, he does, because he played for United, and and he could probably come after me for this, but he's got a giant pair of ears. So but he's no guilty of trying to kill Dundee Football Club. So I'm okay with that. And Doddsy was good with me, and so was Chisholm. We used to go down to Care Park and go cycling and that. They were spot on. Some of their bonkers decisions, and their team didn't play very well, and they get, there's a lot of.
I wasn't a good vibe.
No. But they weren't. You got to understand the position they were put in. They were put in a position where they believed that this money man, who came and got them. And remember the circumstances in which they got the job. They weren't first choice. Jockey had lost his job after the Airdrie game. We got beat 3-0 at Airdrie. Quite a bit of money. We blew the league. We were 11 points clear or something. Then we blew it by playing a game at Dens in December. Got beat at home for Airdrie. Then turned out Jockey's last game was also Airdrie, but it was away from home. And we got beat 3-0, and that was the nail in the coffin. But that night, when they'd made the decision that Jockey was moving on, they went after Ian McCall. They weren't going after Gordon Chisholm to begin with. So I believed.
Did you never want a derby Ian McCall?
I wasn't on the board or anything at that time, and I was at Airdrie that day, and I went home that night, or I was on my way home that night at sort of 6 o'clock, believing that it was going to be Ian McCall. By 7 o'clock, it was Gordon Chisholm, and he was signed already. So it was a strange one, but. They were, I believe they were promised all sorts in terms of what they could sign, and certainly the names they brought to me and the kind of wages that people were going to be on would have been incredible, like absolutely incredible. You couldn't believe that the people, and I actually had to say to them, because they were skipping me and going straight to Callum to see if he'll give them money to sign players, and that's no way to run the club. And Callum was told, if you do that, I'm off, and they were told, if you do that, I'm off, and I'll tell everybody why I'm off. But they were, there was a boy, I don't know if I should really name names. Darryl Duffy played for Hibs and Falkirk and played for, I think, Bristol City or Bristol Rovers or something. They were wanting to sign him for $6,000 a week in the first division. They didn't have that kind of money. That's 5 players. But that was, and I think that vibe and that, something just didn't click with them and the players, I think, and it just didn't work. The results weren't good, and the Cowdenbeath game was vitriolic. Proper vitriolic. I think there's a couple of people swung for them at that game, as far as I remember. But
trying to go over the fence.
Yeah, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. But for me, my relationship with them struggled a little bit after we played against Stenhousemuir away in the League Cup, and we got beat.
Yeah,
we got beat 4-1. I think.
Yeah, we got slaughtered. But
that day we played a guy. He was a young fella that they brought up from England. A guy called Nitan Sansara. I don't know if you remember him. He only played a couple of games for us. First game was against Partick Thistle. He got sent off and gave away a penalty in his first game. And then we were playing Stenhousemuir in the League Cup. And so we didn't have. It wasn't. It was a bit strange because we weren't really in the trouble we ended up in. Well, it must have been quite close though, because it would be September time. And they wanted to bring up this young fella, and I let him come and stay in my house. I took in a few boys over the piece to come in, Sparky being one, and Newton Sansara was another. But they brought up Nitan, and before the Stenhousemuir game, they met with him and on the Monday and promised him he was getting a contract. No matter what, he was getting a contract after the Stennismuir game. Then, after they got beat 4-1 for Stennismuir, and the criticism I will tell the two of them is they're very bad losers. We'll get to the Brechin game later, because I think Barry touched on that as well. But the Stennismuir game, they told Neaton Sansara that he wasn't getting a contract in the car park. And the boy was up staying in my house, and I had to drive him back to my house. Can you imagine? The boy's been told he's got a job, comes up, has a bit of a stinker at Stennismuir, but he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the reason we got beat 4-1 at Stennismuir. And they tell him in the car park he's not getting a job. So I took him home to my house and got him a flight as quickly as I could, and trying to shuffle him out the door as quickly as I possibly can. And I went in and called Gordon Chisholm to the office and told him that under no circumstances were they ever allowed to treat somebody like that again while I was in charge at Dundee Football Club, because it wasn't the right way to treat people. And from then on, I didn't have a great relationship with him, because I'm not prepared to talk to people that way. And I'm not saying I was disappointed, but I certainly wasn't fighting their corner when it came to administration, because I thought, well, the kind of money that those boys are on, we can't afford that anyway. And I just didn't. The vibe wasn't good. You're right. The vibe was a bit off.
Yeah, it's like a key point to the story. It's like the appointment Barry that came after that. It's like the vibe's the word, to be fair. So that's what kept it going, is it?
That was. So Barry Smith. So lots of things I could say about Barry Smith. The people have said already, because he was the leader, he was the manager. It was Barry's responsibility to get the team on the pitch to do what they needed to do. Barry Smith accepted the job at Dundee Football Club for pretty much the same money as he was on as a youth coach. Don't know if Barry never tells anybody that.
Yeah,
I don't think he does talk about it. But when it was clear that Chisholm and actually Gordon Chisholm and Billy Dodds, I don't like calling them by their surnames, because for me that's no polite. Because they did not try to kill the club, so I find it hard to. I mean, I didn't like some of the behaviour, but it's what it is. I couldn't think of anybody better to galvanise everything, because remember, one of the things we were going to have to do was play youth players, and Barry was in charge of the youth team. So it was important that if he was going to have to pick young boys, you had to know who they were, and you had to understand what their limitations were and what they could do and what they couldn't do. And he was Mr. Dundee. I mean, he's the third all-time appearance holder for Dundee, I think. Third.
Came in 95 till 2000, was it test? Did he get a testimonial? Was there 10 years?
He eventually got a testimonial. Yeah, he did not so long ago. No, was that Cammy's? It wasn't even Barry's. Barry didn't get a testimonial. No, he didn't.
He should have. But yeah, they came in 95. Yeah.
But would I laugh with Barry about this now? But would anybody say Barry Smith was their favourite Dundee player? Probably no. Not at that time, because we had Knigy and all kinds.
They wouldn't. He was. We touched on this. He was the consistent.
Yeah.
Like we forgot about Gavin Wright. Gavin Wright was a consistent as well, but Abdi just had like a love for Barry. But yeah, not like a favourite player sort of love. But
I think what I saw in Barry was that Barry bought into Dundee, the city. Barry moved to Dundee as a Dundee player. Barry went to shop in Dundee after we got beat. At that when people are living on the West Coast, when they come through in the car and they go back after training, they don't have to see anybody in Tesco. They don't have to see anybody when they're in the town with their missus. But Barry did. He always did. Mm-hmm. And he, in a way, Barry grew up. Barry's Dundonian now. Barry's no for Paisley anymore.
You're right. He is Mr. Dundee.
Yeah. So it made sense to me that would go and get Barry. But there was another reason. And the reason was the Brechin City game that we lost. Barry... Jim Muir very kindly, I think Barry touched on it, but Jim Muir very kindly let Barry choose whether he played against Dundee or no.
Oh, yeah.
And Chisholm and Dodds,
They went in the Huffy.
in this case, I will call them by their surnames. But in that case, they were very angry that we as a club, also me, made the decision that Barry could play against us if he wanted. And the reason was, and I said this to Gordon and Billy, if we can't beat Brechin with Barry Smith in the team, it doesn't really matter who they pick, we're going to be struggling. Because Barry was 34, I think.
But 36, I think.
Oh, was he 36?
He had the same reaction as you, yeah.
Yeah, but he was, I mean, Barry, to be fair, at 36 had the same speed he had when he was 23. You know, he wasn't any faster or slower. He was just a bit quicker in the head, probably. But when Barry, you know, if you can't beat Brechin City with Barry in the team, you probably aren't going to beat them when he's not playing. But we didn't win, and we got beat. And
on penalties,
penalties, yeah. But, you know, we also missed the penalty during the game.
Yep.
Lee Griffiths missed the penalty into the Dundee fans, where the ball went that far over the bar. I think it landed in his missus's lap, and his.
What end?
Tell you a couple of. Don't know if we'll go near the Lee Griffiths stories, to be fair. But the reaction after it was horrific. Running about, they were angry. They'd immediately switched in the 90, you know, the game's 90 minutes or extra time and penalty, whatever it was. And immediately after the game, they switched in the swearing and the Barry Smith angle of it became apparent in the stand enclosure at Glebe Park. So I went and knocked the door and asked Jim Weir if I could come into their dressing room, and went to see Barry and said, don't worry, when you come in tomorrow everything will be fine. And I went to see them two and told them, when he comes in tomorrow, nothing, absolutely nothing. You can get rid of that anger right now because it's not happening. And Barry carried himself like a proper football person that night, and that made me think he's got something about him. I didn't know Barry that well. I knew that he was in charge of it because I always used to go and watch the youths, and I used to watch the kids on the weekend.
So it was Jockey that brought Barry back to the club, was it?
But you could just tell. It's hard to put into words now, but it's just a feeling that that's the guy.
You thought he was the guy for the job, yeah.
And he was willing to do it. I mean, he was the cheapest as well.
Yeah, but you see, to pick somebody for this job, like I mean, there would have been a few candidates, but
there was no candidates. It was Barry Smith and nothing. That was it.
That was it.
Yeah, I didn't look at any.
Jockey wasn't even in the equation for a third stint.
No, because we were. Bear in mind, if Barry didn't get the Dundee manager's job, he would have been made redundant. Yeah. You know, this is the decision making process. Who have we already got?
So it was already like, not even that he stepped up, but it was just like you got this feeling that he could do this.
Absolutely, and I went to see him and I had a good chat with him. I went to his house. I think he's still in the same house, and had a chat with him. And would he be interested in, you know? It wasn't certain because we had to then agree it with the administrator, and the administrator agreed, and that's what we went with. And
if we hadn't got Barry, it was going to be you, because with your analytics and going through all the players.
Well, you know, at that time I couldn't even tell Barry what the team could be. We didn't know, because part of the reason for picking Barry was just in case Brian Jackson said no to the team, because if he'd said no, the boys who were playing for Barry in the under-18s the previous week would be playing in the first team.
So it's a wonder how Barry never played, to be fair.
Well, have you seen the Brechin game and how slow he was?
So what game was it that you were like, you started to feel like, you know what, we are going to do this?
Before the Stirling game. I never felt it was ever going to be an issue.
When you showed me the team that day up in that boardroom, I knew that day we were all right. As soon as I saw it, I thought,
but is this before the 25-point deduction?
It was when, I can't remember, but it's when Harry...
To say like we're going to be all right with that, like, I didn't think a lot of
people... No, the 25 points, half of the seasons, if you look at the stats of it, half of the seasons with the amount of games we could win, half of the seasons you would be okay and half of them you wouldn't. But it had never been done before, and I don't think in British football it's been done since. I think we were by far the
we were the first. We were the most points in the world, were we not, at that point?
At that time, I think there's a couple of countries now have gone for 32, 33 points, but we were the only team in British football with that size of deduction who didn't get relegated. But you've also got to look at the quality of the teams we're playing against. And I'm not taking away from what the guy's done, but if you can keep Gary Harkins and Lee Griffiths and Craig Forsyth and Stephen O'Donnell, and then put people like Craig McEwen next to them and bring them down a wee bit, Craig. I just felt that, Rab Douglas in the goal, people that could finish, would be okay against that. We should have been winning that league, but if that's probably the most galling thing. If Callum and that had paid the bill, I think we go on and win the league that year. Maybe no, we Gordon and Billy. That's you just don't know, because they didn't pick those players. They didn't like some of them. They were playing Griffiths on the wing.
But to be fair, you're saying when did Harry feel that we were going to be okay? It didn't take long. I mean, it only took a matter to get once the point deduction was in and we were sitting bottom of the league with the points that we had. It only took a few weeks and we were out of the positions.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
It took 6 weeks.
Yeah, and we were out of that position.
Because we started off 12 or 13 points adrift.
Yeah.
And 6 or 7 weeks later, we weren't adrift anymore.
And that's what we're saying about poor Stirling Albion. They collected the money and then at the end of the season got relegated.
But Stirling were always going to be in trouble.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But I think some of the things, especially in the first 3 games, we had Stirling, Falkirk and Dunfermline. And Falkirk and Dunfermline are the games that you would expect to win in the circumstances. Falkirk especially was a cracker. And that's where I started thinking, it's up to me to stick up for Dundee Football Club wherever we go now, because I didn't go to boardrooms in the Falkirk game. I also didn't go to the boardroom, sat in with the Dundee fans at Falkirk as well, as I did most of the games, because it wasn't in my bag. I didn't need, I always drove to games. Quite often my daughter came with me, but it was always about supporting the club and supporting the players, but it also allowed me to walk about if I felt like it. So when we equalised at Falkirk, there was a guy, if you see it on the video now, you just think, wow, there was a guy in a bananas and pyjamas outfit at the Falkirk game. And when we equalised, he fell over the advertising boards onto the track. But Ross Wilson, who went on to have a great career in football, I think is he at Rangers now? I don't know. He was at Nottingham Forest and a lot of places down south, Southampton, and I think he might be the head of football at Rangers, I'm not sure. But Ross was at Falkirk at the time. And Ross was running about under the main stand. Because we'd got a late equaliser at Falkirk, Ross was running about cursing and shouting and hooliganism this and hooliganism that. And I swore at him and I said, but it's a guy in a bananas and pyjamas outfit, Ross. Do you really think that's what hooligans look like in football? And that's the way the game was carrying on. They just didn't get it. They didn't understand ordinary punters, and they didn't understand people who just love their club. I mean, what makes you turn up in a bananas and pyjamas outfit? I'd like to know who it was, to be fair, if I could ever find them. It was that game.
There's a video of this.
Because
he falls over the thing.
He does.
Yeah.
He just falls. He's not causing bother. He just falls over that. He shouldn't have been there. Fine. But he's loving his club and he's wanting his club to survive, and he just falls over an advert board.
It's one of the ones that are pointed
out.
Yeah,
triangular.
I've seen it. This is on video. Yeah.
I'd love to know who it was.
Probably find that out.
But you end up rowing with everybody about that sort of thing. Because you're like, no, you're not picking on my team.
I think it's because you're coming as a football fan first. Then you're actually in that position.
You're a Dundee supporter. And when you play football, do you know what? For most people, football on a Saturday is an escape for their life, one way or another. And you go and you have people, I don't know you away from football. You don't know people, you know the football person. It's a bit like the in-betweeners, it's kind of like football pals, but you're talking about people you see once a fortnight, or a couple hundred of them you see at away games.
They're like the old boy who's been going for like 50 years.
You don't know them. You don't know their names. You say hello. You didn't say hello to them when you see them in the town. You just see them at the football. And it's that thing there that they can't bottle. They don't know how to put that in a bottle and keep it. And I wish the club now actually would catch that and get it in a bottle and give it back to the fans and do things for them and make sure that they're involved, because the fans are just not involved as much as they should be. And it's because, when the fans were involved, they made a donkey's arse of it. So, what do you do?
you want to elaborate on that? When the fans
No, just yet. We'll get to that.
So, right, one of my favourite stories that Steve likes to always tell is that you and him were going to fill up a white van so the administrators couldn't get any other stuff.
I've heard of that. I'm not sure how true it is.
So did that not happen?
I don't think it happened.
All right, okay.
Certainly in denial. No. While we believed, and I believed that we would survive, you also had to make sure that everything was protected. And I'm not sure it was quite as blatant as a van, but certainly things were put at the road so that if it ever came to it, Dundee Football Club could survive. Because there was only a couple of things massively important. One was playing in dark blue, and one was playing at Dens Park. And provided we could manage both of those things going forward, there would always be a Dundee Football Club. And that was the aim. It eventually became the aim to not get relegated and to do other things. But the simple thing for me, my job was to make sure that Dundee Football Club continued in its present form, wearing dark blue and playing at Dens Park. That was it. When you take it into simple tax.
So how did it feel when you accomplished that?
It was well, I didn't. It was the players and the manager and the staff. It was
everybody's played their part in this. We have documented the players' part of it, but like the background staff part of it, like we're trying to get from you now. You've obviously it's took a bit of your heart and soul. It must have.
Yeah, but it became sour because the love for the club that everybody had, and I'm talking about people that couldn't afford to put £1 in a bucket but did. I'm talking about the Lorraine Noble, Ali King, Lorraine Anderson, Ailsa in the cash office, the people who turn up on a Saturday to count the money for 2 hours and get paid £10 or whatever. Those people were making sure the club survived. And they turned up and they done their thing. The players and that's very well documented, as you said. But the players always got a lunch. They always got, their strips washed. There is some funny stories about the strips and that, but I think Barry touched on some of them. But we done everything. The staff, not me, but the staff did everything to make sure them players were as looked after as possible. Now, you couldn't possibly get it all right because we didn't have any money. But it became sourer and sourer for me with the arrival. Actually, after survival, it became horrific because I didn't want to work at Dundee Football Club anymore, and it was down to all sorts of things. And people are going to hate it, but it needs saying at some point. The amount of people who wanted to turn up to football matches on a Saturday wearing a suit and getting a high-vis vest became incredible. Like people who we own the club. Oh, do you? Is that right? Okay. What do you know about it? And they were, organising five-a-side, or not five-a-side, penalty shootouts at half-time with people going on that had suits and high-vis vests. And I thought, what is going on here? What has happened? What happened to the people who wanted their club to survive under any circumstances, no matter what league we're in, etc. All of that in the end done for me, because I just thought, this is no for me, no on 700 quid a week, because it wasn't, we didn't get the 150 or 200 grand the boys get now. It's 35 grand a year, and it never changed for the first day I got there till I left. There was never a pay rise or anything like that.
Wow, you done that for 35 grand a year?
I got paid more money at Sports Director than I did at Dens. So there was always, and the criticism,
that's what I mean. Like the criticism, the public eye, with like everybody going at you.
That was all right. I didn't mind that, because whatever came, my club survived. So I didn't care. I goes as far off a duck's back, and people at the time were saying there's some things bothered me. I didn't like them bothering my family. The press. Jim Spence was told where the camera would get rammed if he kept doing it, but I remember being outside Dens.
What did Jim Spence get? Him with the hair, right?
Yeah. Jim Spence he's actually all right. For an Arab, he's no bad lad. But I remember one time there was something going on that had to be done at Dens for something, and my family was in the car, and the BBC cameraman came running over with Spence, and putting the camera, looking into the car, but I'm for Dundee. So I told them what was going to happen to the camera if he kept doing that, and I think that was a bit of a shock to them. Telling them that we absolutely would not go into liquidation. These were all confident things, but dealing with what came next and the nonsense of fans' ownership was, and I was probably one of the biggest believers in fans owning their football clubs that you could find until we did. And that put me off completely. Stevie knows I'm a big Hamburg fan, and they own 50% of the club in the German Bundesliga. But it would curl your toes. It was
the stadium. Davy Forbes had something to do with the stadium for a long time. For the Forbes.
Yeah, Davy.
Yeah, he had the shop round the corner for me.
He did on Clippy Road.
Yeah, I used to go around like full of it on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, and I'd be getting all the updates for him back in the day.
The thing about, I'm okay with honest mistakes. People in all jobs and all walks of life make mistakes in their daily jobs. I've no problem with that. What I don't like is dishonest dealings and people who don't act, they'll on the surface act in supposedly for their club, but actually it's for them. I kind of deal with that very well, and people like Davy Forbes, right? Davy was Davy, but Davy was Dundee supporter, so was his mate George McGregor. Both Dundee fans had words with them on various things and tell them that they buy season tickets if they want to come into games because they used to walk through lounges for free. But they were Dundee supporters just the same as I was, and and you can't take that away from people. It's just their personality. But the people who are honest Dundee supporters, I couldn't care less what they'd done because they didn't do it in a bad way. Those boys are all right. And Davy's no longer with us now, of course.
R.I.P. Dave. Like you say, he did love the club. He used to go in the shop and it was like all the Dundee stuff and that.
But there was a lot of guys kicked the arse out of it though. There was a lot of guys who were walking in, you saw them getting let in the stands and stuff or nothing when we'd been buying season tickets. And
we stopped that.
Yeah.
I mean, the first run I had in with Davy and George McGregor was kicking them back out the lounge and telling them to, if they wanted to go to the match that day, they had to get back to the shop quick and buy a ticket because they were coming in and just wandering in. But those guys were the problem. Later on, when the fans, and I say when the fans own the club because most of the fans who put money in buckets didn't want to own a football club. They were just trying to help their club, and that was a struggle in the Defiant season, that people who put money in the buckets in the Derry or in the Coxie or wherever outside the ground in the stand, didn't matter where, that money didn't come into the club. That money went to D for Life to buy shares later on, and that was money that I felt that people were putting into buckets to help their club that day, to pay the wages that week. I didn't think they expected that money to be gathered up to buy shares.
Yeah, no, like you said, that's what I thought the bucket money was used for.
No, we never got that money.
God, how many bucket runs were done that season, man?
Yeah, but that was
every
part
game,
of
was it not?
Yep, every game.
But that was part of the thing. That wasn't for running the club. That was for gathering up money, like a fighting fund, if you like, for D for Life.
I did not know that. No, I did not know that. No, like you said, I thought like the buckets, they were out every game. I thought it was because I was a known thing that people like didn't have washing powder to do the strips and all this sort of stuff.
But
I did not know that.
We were pretty. I mean, I'm not saying we're lucky because I think the team deserved it, but we got crowds enough to pay everything. The people who turned up and paid their money to get into games.
This is what I found so special about it. I remember the vibe about it. Getting when we got into the high teens of games and everything, it was like the run was a buzz, like a serious buzz. Like has Dundee ever went on an unbeaten run like that since?
No,
we've never done it before, and we've never done it since. So the 20th game was Queen of the South. That's the ball. I've got the Iron Brew ball from that game. But we got to 23, and I believe that if they needed to win the other games, they would have done. We just didn't need to win them anymore.
Yeah.
I think that was the...
Let's take about a minute to say that. Like, they've never done it since, they've never done it before. Like, we needed to do it then. Like, that is a special thing in itself. That's why we've always said, like, there should be a film about, or... It was the run, it was the buzz where it was like... the experience of, like you said, chucking money in the bucket, thinking it was going up to help the club. Everybody was galvanised to it. It was a special. I never think I'll ever see anything like it again in life.
It was special from a football point of view. I don't think the fundraising efforts were
spectacular.
They weren't spectacular. They weren't even close to spectacular. And that's no criticism of people who did put £1 in a bucket.
No, see what's very thing. You've hit the nail on the hat. You've hit the hammer on the nail there. Like, we do remember it for the football. You know what I mean? Because of that running and all that sort of stuff.
It was the football that was the season. It was, and that's good, because that's what football's about. It's supposed to be about winning football matches. But it became so political in terms of what was going to happen next that the following season, I mean, you'll not know, and Barry didn't know until about 2 hours ago. I was talking to him. The following season, Barry was lucky to keep his job after 6 games.
How the fuck could you sack Barry after 6 games with that?
Well, we didn't, obviously, but that was the plan. The board wanted to lose Barry, and
what did you say to the board?
Told the board, I told the board that I would be following Barry out the door if it was happening, and then I would be going to the paper and naming the individuals who brought it to the table in the first place as the people who decided this was going to happen. And nobody wanted to put their hand up and have that happen to them. They were quite happy for us to take the flak on the back of the papers. We didn't have a great start to the season, but remember, you've got a workman-like first division team we had in the Defiant season, with a few splashes of spectacular with Gary Harkins and Lee Griffiths, and to a certain extent Fozzie, and things that happened, and a former international goalkeeper in Rab Douglas. You know, you've got all kinds of people and people playing out their skin, you know.
What's the famous? Is the story true that Rab Douglas grabbed Sparky by the throat in the changing room?
I never went in the changing room. I didn't go into the changing room. I didn't.
Never hear nothing about the club, that.
And if I did, I wouldn't talk about it.
Hey, get Rab on it to tell us that
I'll tell you, get Rab on.
Rab will come on and tell you that. But I think if that happened, and it happened at the Airdrie game, then that would be the Airdrie game you'd be talking about.
What was your favourite moment from it all?
Running about with the 25-point T-shirt on at the Partick Thistle game.
No, my favourite moment was a game, the only game I did not go to in that whole season, was Ross County away when we won 1-0 when Leighton scored.
Yeah.
I didn't go. Yeah. About 3 weeks before that game, I had predicted to myself that would be the game that would happen at, and we would be safe at that game. So I arranged to go to London and watch Chelsea, West Ham, with a wife, and meet up with Bill Colvin and Pam Colvin, who we'll get to hopefully at some point in this, and have a meal and a night out and just watch it from afar and let the manager and the players. I've never been a kind of pitch spectacular, go on and acclaim the crowd type of person, so I wanted that day to be for the manager and the players, and it was, and they had a brilliant day. But me and Bill Colvin watched it down in London from a distance and got the results on Sky Sports at football.
So how did that feel?
No, I thought that's the day it would happen.
You predicted that, but like okay, you predicted that. Like, how did it actually feel when it happened?
In a lot of ways, I wouldn't want to say it was relief. We were very pleased and very, 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 very drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning in the Strand or something in some restaurant or other. But the reality for me was that was the confirmation day. But it was coming. It was always coming that we would be okay. And I thought, as I said before, I always believed in Barry, and I always believed in the players, and I believed in Matty Lockwood and Big Rab to do their part in the background, and all the backroom staff and everybody. Not just those guys, but you were behind the scenes. You know, Pat Linney doing his bit, for example. You know, people never talk about Pat. Pat was there all the time. And Pat got me through a lot of, not bad moments, but he talked me through football. And I played football, but I wasn't at that level. And Pat would tell me funny stories when I was feeling a bit iffy or whatever, and it was quite nice. But there was a whole load of people, as I said earlier on, Jack Robertson, for example, who was a lawyer, you know, all kinds of people got involved, and at that moment I was happy. I was happy for the club, but I wouldn't say I was relieved, because
there was no this big relief.
No, the relief came with the getting out of administration, not the survival in the league. That was secondary to coming out of administration.
Paying the HMRC.
No, we didn't pay them.
No?
They never got anything.
Is that not who the debt was to?
Yeah, but we didn't. In the end, there was a gentleman who worked with Brian Jackson, who probably to this day Dundee fans don't even know his name. Who, when people say to me, who saved Dundee Football Club, apart from the obvious of the players and the manager, there's this particular individual who came up with all kinds of plans and accounting things that I couldn't do. And he was a Hearts fan, and nobody knows his name. And he came up with some things that made the CVA possible, and that's how we knew it was going to be all right, because he came up with the accounting stuff legally, nothing untoward.
A Hearts fan kind of contributed to saving
Hearts
Dundee.
Fan helped save Dundee Football Club, and the guy's name, I'm happy to tell you, he was a guy who worked for PKF at the time called Bob Barclay, and nobody knows who he is. And Dundee Football Club owe that man
Well, thank you, Bob Barclay.
a huge debt of gratitude.
He obviously never seen the Albert Kidd days there.
Yeah, he did. We actually spoke about it. And funny enough, I was thinking about him last year. I was kind of hoping Hearts would win the league.
I wanted Hearts to win the league, man. Yeah.
I wanted them to win for all sorts of reasons, but for Bob Barclay, I wanted them to win the league last year. And I never forgot what Bob done, because Bob was the one that came up with some of the...
This is what I love doing about this defiance season. You always get there's always an unsung hero from every story, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
That was a good one. A Hearts fan.
Yeah, probably the rest of the Hearts fans will be after him now.
You'll be going to Tynecastle again.
We'll get the Bob Barclay dark blues, and that'll be the nail in his coffin.
So, after he got out of the administration and all that out of the way, what happened next?
Well, it was business as usual then. You know, we were moving on without Sparky, without Fozzie, and without Harkins. And Harkins was a big one because he went for free to Kilmarnock, and people couldn't understand why. You know, why I let Gary, because it was me. I let Gary go to Kilmarnock for nothing. And again, you know, I was all right taking the criticism because I just never talked about it. But when we went into administration, people didn't get pay cuts. There was no pay cuts across the board, because if you offer a footballer a pay cut, the contract's over and they can leave. So we couldn't even offer pay cuts. And some people volunteered pay cuts, and some people volunteered pay cuts to keep other people in jobs. But the club could not go to people and cut their wages. So one of the first conversations I had when we were we'd gone into administration, but we were having to make the choices, was with Gary Harkin's agent. And it wasn't Gary's doing, but his agent was on it straight away, looking for him to be released and to go, because he thought a pay cut was coming for Gaz, and it didn't. And the agent wanted him away. And I actually had a word with Gary, because Gary was one of mine to talk to about staying. And I had a conversation with Gary and said that I felt that if I could keep the team that I wanted to keep, then Gary would be the captain, and if he'd done his bit as the captain and we survived, that I would give him a word that if we wouldn't be in the Premier League the following year. Gary was too good for the First Division, but he was also Gary Harkins. So, you know, he doesn't. I don't think he'll criticise me for saying, but there was a yard of pace no there, and he had all the skill in the world, but he's a footballer, not a runner, and that wasn't really what a lot of Premier League teams would pay money for. So, reached an agreement with Gary's agent to say, look. And actually with Gary first, and said, if you stay as a captain this year and we do all right and we manage to survive, I'll give you my word that you can go for nothing at the end of the season. And so I had to keep my word, and it was that simple. You kind of tell people that and then not do it. And it never came to it, because he never got a transfer from Kilmarnock for money, but I also agreed with the Kilmarnock chairman, because the Kilmarnock chairman knew that he had this gentleman's agreement to go, and got a 50% sell-on deal with Kilmarnock, because I said you can have him for free, but that's no the free you think you're having. We'll put a 50% sell on. You can have them because we've reached that agreement with them. But that was happening all the time, you know. And we were going into that following season with quite a depleted squad, really. And certainly you can't take Gary Harkins or Craig Forsyth and Lee Griffiths out of any Scottish Championship team and think they're going to be the same the following year. And that was next. It was just back to operating within the costs and the money we had and moving on. So it's just business as usual at that point.
Business as usual, yeah.
And making sure the structure was there, you know. And I spoke briefly about Bill Colvin, and again, when we talk about people who should go down in the history books of bringing Dundee Football Club through that era, outside of the playing staff and the manager, Bill and Pam Colvin, you know, they were never wanting. When we needed something, they were there, and they were there the following season too. And Bill and Pam, again, Bill's a Dunfermline fan. He wasn't even a Dundee fan. It was Pam's dad that was a Dundee fan, and Pam as well. But the two of them were a massive support to me for the following year. And in fact, to Bill's credit, when I decided to move on, he wanted to pay me himself personally to stay. But I just didn't want to stay by that time.
When did you leave?
I left. I resigned in, I think, October the following season. I came back again for a wee while, but the resignation was a particularly tough time for me because I wasn't planning to go at that time, but some things had happened in the August and September that I just couldn't accept, and so I was really struggling to act with the rest of the board at that time, and decided, no, I just don't want to work like this. So I was further off. I ended up having to come back because at the same time, shortly after, they were about to lose the chairman as well, because the chairman was the reason that I wanted to go in the first place. But that's a story that's never been told.
Like a few of them. Is there any stories that you want to mention that you think you've not said here?
I think that one, you know, I said at the time I would not talk about the chairman and his role in my departure on the condition that he never got involved in football again.
He's back in football now, is he?
He's back in football now, yeah. So I'm okay to talk about it. I don't hold any malice, but I think it's important for people to understand the pressure that we were getting, or that I fell under. Bear in mind that, you know, just the same as every other Dundee supporter, I love my club, and I was proud as anything to be working at Dens. I played at Dundee when I was a kid. I was lucky enough to wear the shirt playing on Dens as a kid. But at that time, would I have stayed? I probably would have stayed, despite the poor wages and grief and 50% of the Dundee fans hating me and 100% of United fans. So it's 3 and 4 people in Dundee, you know, and all the nicknames and whatnot. I could live with that, to be involved in the football club. But that year, when I was on holiday in Orlando with the family, the chairman, who at the time worked at the DWP, don't know what, I'm not going to say he was on the counter because I can't be certain. He made a play when I was away that he should be the CEO and the chairman, and I should be let go. And how he done that was very duplicitous and untruthful. And when I found out that it was untruthful, I made sure that he would have to go.
Oh, okay.
And so the only way I could make sure that he had to go would be to come back and help them get through that transition.
Right, okay,
because the club couldn't take upheaval. The club then and the club now needs stability and needs to have a period of time. And I think maybe we talk later on about the current team and the manager and all the things what happens in football. But the club needed stability. Spoke to Steve earlier and I said, I'm a bit of a stat person as well. And Dundee Football Club haven't won a third of their games in the Premier League for 40 years.
40 years?
They haven't won more games than they've lost in the Premier League for 40 years. So when you talk about stability, winning 10 games last season, then winning 11 games this season, winning 12, that's progress. Because we don't win 12 games in the football season in the Premier League.
I was saying this about the Celtic game the other night, like when we've seen the squad come out for the first game of the season. I thought they played really well. I thought they were moving the ball about, they were pressing, we were maybe needing a bit of a striker, but we're used to getting like 4 or 5 for them.
Absolutely, and I think the current manager is due a huge amount of credit for both surviving last season and putting up with all the stuff that he put up with to stay with the football club. And when he came, my strangely, very strange link here, but my cousin worked with him at Brentford, and he told me what a great guy he was and that he really hoped that he would do well. And I think you're now seeing the personality of the manager and his willingness and his skill and ability with developing people. And I actually love how he talks, and I love how he doesn't hide. He tells the truth, and he'll say what he needs to say. But he's not doing it in a look at me way or a histrionic way. He's doing it in a genuine... And I think the players would probably run through the walls for that guy. And I really hope that the fans can get behind them and start turning up.
I think the fans are starting to really get behind them now. Like you said, I was toxic last year for like half of the season.
Yeah,
anyway.
we were unprepared. I think the length of the contracts and people's contracts all finishing at the same time, and young boys going away for next to nothing and all that. That wasn't conducive to giving a new manager, who, to be fair, nobody really wanted.
Yeah.
You know, he was probably like 19th choice or something. There was a whole load of names before him, and you know, he wasn't a sexy choice for the club. You know, he knows that, but he was a very good choice in the end, and he seems to be a thoroughly decent man, and that's important for the stability of the club. But people have to understand we haven't won more games than we've lost for 40 years.
I never knew that stat. That's been a Dundee fan right there.
Yeah, but we've done that. We actually did that for 4 years in a row: 84, 85, 86, 87.
That's what I'm saying. That's that favourite thing. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So, and I think the manager's due a huge amount of credit, but that's no quite the same as the year after Defiant. You know, so one of the things that happened during the Defiant season was that there was certain individuals who didn't want to be named, and they still don't want to be named. One of them's passed away, I'll tell you him, Stephen McPherson, and he lived in South Africa. Another one's passed away, a guy called Ken Scott. People pledged money to me to get us through after administration. I didn't want the money before administration because the administrator would want it. But we definitely were going to need money to run the club after the administration. So they pledged money, and I didn't want to take it. I said, look, wait, and we'll take it after, so that we can, because you would lose it.
Yeah, we're going to,
So we'd go to everybody else. So they'd all pledged the money. And there was one particular pledge, which I didn't take at the time, but I went to meet the lady quite a few times. Actually went down to see her, and we got on very well, and it was about, and I still see her at away games. I'll say hello and we talk, but after the escapade where the chairman wanted to be the CEO as well, it was put to me by the board that this lady didn't want to talk to me anymore because she got on better with the chairman, a guy called Stuart Murphy. I don't know if you remember him or not. Just name check him to be sure nobody forgets. Stuart Murphy was the chairman who'd done this. He had gone to the board and said that she'd offered him, because they were old pals, £100,000 for the following season, but she wouldn't have put it in while I was still there. And I thought this was a bit odd, because I always got on pretty well with her. I was also told I wasn't allowed to talk to her, so I didn't talk to her. But I also said, if that's the case and that's what people really think, I'm happy to go, because the club needs £100,000 more than they need me. You'll always get another. You'll get another person that will come in for 35 grand a year and do that job, but you'll not get £100,000. So I quit and said I'll go. But when I went, I decided to phone everybody who'd been nice to me while I was in the job, and that was one of the phone calls I made. And I phoned her, and I phoned all the others as well, and I said to them, thanks very much, appreciate your help and your money and all the other things. And I thanked them for helping save Dundee Football Club.
She said it wasn't true.
Sorry?
Did she say it wasn't true?
She was surprised at my phone call, because I said to her, and I'm not going to name her. I wish I should, but people will know who she is. But she had offered money to me, and she'd supposedly offered 100,000 to Stuart because she knew him. And I didn't, I never doubted it, because I couldn't in my head create a story where a chairman would carry on like that, especially when their club was still in some degree of peril. You didn't want to go into a third administration, for example. So I called her and I said, look, I don't know what went wrong. I don't know why you didn't want to talk to me towards the end, but thank you for all your help. I really appreciate what you've done. I really appreciate our chats before, and I hope you and your pals are still happy to help the club. And I'm really pleased at the money that you're going to put in. And she said, Harry, this has been bothering me. I've been wondering why you weren't talking to me. And she's an older woman. I think she's probably in her 70s now. And she's got grandkids who are Dundee supporters. She'll maybe hate me if she's not in her 70s when I think about it. But she's grandkids, her whole family are Dundee supporters. And she just wanted to help her club. And I says, well, what do you mean? I says, you and Stuart go way back and you're going to give £100,000. And she said, I've no idea what you're talking about. And we don't go way back. I've met the guy once at a business development club meeting 10, 12 years ago. And she had no idea what I was talking about. So I was stuck. I'd resigned. I'm leaving. I'm making my phone calls to say I'm away. And I'd said my goodbyes to Barry and everything, and I wasn't coming back. So on that board, the chairman had come in with Morris Kidd, another, God rest his soul. Morris is no longer with us either. Morris and I never seen eye to eye in life, but Morris was was Stuart's pal, and so I phoned Morris, specifically Morris, and asked Morris and Scott Glendy to come down to the house. And the reasoning behind that was Morris didn't like me. So if I told Morris's story and he understood the severity of the situation and understood my side of it, so would everybody else. Because he would be inclined to think I was talking rubbish. So I invited Morris and Scotty down to the house and told them the story. And they couldn't believe it, so we called the board meeting to get the chairman in, and he wouldn't come. Wouldn't come in. And that's where it all went wrong for the chairman, because he just made up. It just wasn't true. None of it was true. And so after a few days, and it actually went up to about 10 days, where the board was a bit in limbo, because I'm leaving, it's been announced I'm going, and then I'm coming back again because they've not got a chairman, because they didn't have anybody to really look after it. And so it became my word against his, because there's no evidence in either direction. So what I did was I said to the board, look, what we'll do is I'll give him some time to collect the money, and then I'll go if he gets it, and if he doesn't collect it, give me 24 hours, because the person had promised that whenever I ask for the money, I'll have it the next day. So I let him go and do his thing, but he didn't, because it wasn't true. And then eventually they understood that none of it was true. And then I called her and said, I need the money now, and it was in 15 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. So then the chairman had to resign. But at the time, the club...
That's like having to resign.
Unbelievable.
Grace, is it?
No.
Well, yes and no, because remember what we were trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve a stable club. Yeah. I didn't want that for the club. I didn't want to be running about blaming people. So he was allowed to make up a story that you had to go for family reasons and all that kind of thing.
Oh, so that's no public information then, no?
No, I never spoke about it in 15 years. I promised that I would not talk about it unless he got involved in football again, and he's back involving himself in football, so I have no problem talking about it now. I've no issue with it.
That might end up a clip. Before we go, because our cameras are going to burn, is there any questions you would like to ask?
I think me and Harry went back years. I most of these stories that he's been saying, I've not heard these.
I won't talk about it.
Yeah, and which is what
he's always surprisingly quiet.
Because I've been very interested in
Because I talk too much. That's why I didn't do interviews, because people didn't get a word in when I'm talking.
No, that. Just like you have been surprisingly quiet.
But as was said, though, I've been waiting on this one for a long time, and I'm glad he's come on. And we've heard stories nobody's ever been told this.
No. Like, I can't believe that's how he ended up leaving the club.
Yeah, I just couldn't. I could not work under those circumstances. And I went back.
Why would you want it? Like, let's be serious, man. Somebody's trying to snake you like that, just.
But it was what it was. But to this day, I never spoke about it, because I did say that as long as he stayed away from football, I wouldn't throw him under a bus. And he chose to get back involved in football. And
so you got your bus driver's hat on and stuff.
It's not out of malice. It's just that I've taken so much crap over the years about it, and why I walked away and all this kind of stuff. And that's why, because I couldn't stay.
But again, you're true to your word, and you've waited.
I waited. I didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Nobody knew.
Well, mate, this has been a pleasure. It's been very educational as well. I feel like I've learnt a lot about that season.
Yeah, I learned a lot more about that season as well.
I feel like I knew nothing about this season until we started this podcast. I mean, serious. Like, I thought I had an understanding because I was like seeing some games and stuff. But it's just so complex.
I said to you that we've been waiting on. Harry's been on about doing a book for a long time, and he's never.
I've got one question for you. You must be incredibly proud of what you took the club through. Because, like, as I say, like, see, I've never seen Dundee win anything. Right, the most special season to me is a Defiant season. It is, because like I've never seen like the club galvanised. I've never seen it come together in that magical 23 game run.
But I didn't do that. That was the manager and the players.
Heavily part of it for your role in that. Do you feel proud?
I'm proud. I wouldn't say proud is a word, because people lost their jobs. That's always at the back of my mind. That I didn't cause that, but people lost their jobs. So we need to bear that in mind when we talk about feelings. I am happy that the club survived. I am proud that the club's still here, but it was never about me. It was mostly the players, the manager, the staff, and frankly, everybody who put as little as 50 pence in a bucket should be proud. All of them should be proud, because it was their club. We haven't got time for it, but I do have my doubts as to how the supporter society ended up owning the club, but that's for another time.
One last question, right? If this ever does get made into a film, who plays you?
It's got to be somebody fat, hasn't it? Because that was.
No, there's got to be somebody ruthless. Clint Eastwood.
No, it's not. Who can put up with all kinds?
Eastwood. He's been 90 years old.
Well, the last podcast you had, I think, was with Hayley Scanlon, who mentioned Bruce Willis a few times. So I think Bruce Willis in Die Hard, where he's got to take everyone on his shoulders himself, that would work for me.
Right, again, this has been very educational, mate. Like I say, I feel like I learn something about this all the time. I greatly appreciate you coming in and telling me these stories. It's been great. Right. This has been episode 17 of the Dundee Sole Podcast with Steve and Harry McLean. Go enjoy your Sunday night.